Hello and welcome to Legal Talk with Robin Bond. I'm Robin Bond, and as you know, my wheelhouse is the world of work, representing employees in employment and severance negotiations and areas of conflict at work. There's been a significant shift in employee attitudes over the past 50 years, a belief by many that they have to take matters into their own hands to take care of themselves in the future. They can't rely on working 30 years for any one employer anymore and getting a pension and a gold watch. Frankly, that type of security is just a thing of the past. And it's not uncommon for younger workers today to embrace self-employment opportunities at far earlier ages than my generation ever considered and other previous generations considered. So franchising is one option that people are exploring to see if this is the path forward for them towards self-autonomy and financial security. So our goal today is to give our viewers a practical framework for evaluating whether or not franchising aligns with their own independence and security goals. So I have a special guest today. His name is Ken Milner. Ken is a special counsel to Warren Mc Graw Knowles, a regional law firm based in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. Ken concentrates his practice in business, franchise, and real estate matters, so he's a perfect guest for this topic. He's a transactional attorney who believes, as I do, our primary job is to keep people out of court so they can concentrate on their businesses and not concentrate on litigation, endlessly for years. Ken has represented both franchisors and franchisees, and I like that because he can give us the perspective from both sides of the table. And he's often been asked to mediate disputes that occur between franchisors and franchisees. So I think it's going to be a very interesting subject today, and I hope it proves helpful to you. So welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to work with you again, Robin.
Well, we are lucky to have you, and we also have a guest question about franchising, so I thought we would start out with that. Janet Roberts of Philadelphia says, there are new franchises starting out every year, like Cart Capital, Site Swan, CEO Life. Is there a resource that you can recommend for researching these new companies?
Janet, that's a great question. And this is often the case when there's a great question. I think you'll find the answer to be surprising. The answer is no. There is no single resource that I could recommend for researching new franchise companies. People and publications and websites which hold themselves out as resources are often influenced by their own preferences, their own experience, or their own revenue streams. As a result, I think that the best bet is to rely on yourself and your trusted advisors. The first thing that you should do is obtain what's known as an FDD, the franchise disclosure document, for whatever franchise business you're hoping to find out about. And that document is huge, but it is supposed to answer virtually every question that you might have about the franchise. And if you review that carefully yourself and with a team to help you, accountant, advisors, attorneys who are experienced in franchising, I think you'll find that FDD and the information you glean from it will provide to you a far more reliable source for judging whether that franchise opportunity is good for you. Remember, there are a lot of great franchising opportunities. That doesn't mean that they're great for you. And so I think it's important for you to do these FDD reviews on your own.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you so much. And here's how to send in your questions to Money Matters TV.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says Send Us Your Questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our host and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows. Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, MONEY, -matters, MATTERS, TV.com.
Well, that was a good segue into our discussion today with that question, Ken. It resonates with me when you say there are a lot of great franchises out there, but the fact that they're great doesn't mean they're great for you, right?
Correct.
So let's get started. Like, from all the available information that's out there, where do I go to get the real skinny and gather the best facts to know what may or may not be right for me? Like, how do I even get started in this process?
As I said before, the best thing to do is, when you think that there are franchise opportunities about which you may have an interest, you should just simply contact that franchisor and ask for that franchisor's FDD, or franchise disclosure document. Now, don't be intimidated when that document comes through your email. It is, probably close to 1,000 pages. It has all sorts of information and is designed to provide to you the information you're going to need to make a decision. The important thing is to understand what's in that FDD. The states and the federal government want to make sure that your FDD contains all of the information and only the information which you need in order to make a decision as to whether this franchise is worth your time and effort and money.
Well, 1,000 pages is pretty overwhelming to most all of us.
Sure is.
Considering most of us have a reading attention span of 1 to 2 minutes. So in the employment world, we have websites like Cafe Pharma and Glassdoor and different counterculture websites that I reference in my book. But these are the things where people go to say, well, what's it really like to be an employee of this company? Is there any similar thing like that out in the internet for people to search for?
In my opinion, the answer is no. But there are still ways to do it, because one of the things that is in that franchise disclosure document, the franchisor must put a list of all of its franchisees, not only current, but even those who have left the system for one reason or another.
Oh, that's good.
And your best bet is, rather than, as I said, take the opinion of someone who may have a certain bias or a certain belief about different types of things, you are better off picking up the phone and calling that franchisee or former franchisee, as the case may be. Also, when you get that FDD, you shouldn't try and review it all yourself. At the very beginning, there will be about 21 major sections, and those sections should provide to you all of the information you need to know about what you're getting into. But at the same time, you should use your advisors, your accountant, your attorney, people who you trust and people who know about your situation, to review some of the special things that are in there. You should be looking at that item 20 that has the list of all the franchisees, and pick up and make as many phone calls as you can.
That's great advice.
That's a good one.
Thank you. Great advice. Let's talk a little bit about money, because I'm thinking paying all these advisors,
Yeah.
It's going to bring up some money here. But over the past 15 years, there's been a trend of private equity getting more invested in franchises. Maybe they're even the dominant part of franchising. You could comment on that, but they must see something very positive about franchising. I've heard you need millions of dollars to buy like a McDonald's franchise, and probably that's true of a lot of other franchises. So how do you, or how much capital is realistically needed, and how do you go about getting that? Is that where the PE firms are coming in?
Uh, Not quite. Let's take your question into two separate parts. First, let's bust a myth about McDonald's and other franchised companies that their cost too much. The fact is that the initial franchise fee for McDonald's, for one McDonald's store, is $45,000. That's your initial
Wow, I didn't know
franchise
that.
fee. That's right. It's not very much more than pretty
Yeah.
much any other type of well-established franchised business. Um, Now, the real cost of getting involved in a franchise unit comes with all of the ancillary things that you have to do. For example, if you're going to build your own McDonald's restaurant, yeah, that's going to cost a lot of money. If you're going to build a hotel, a Hilton or something like that, sure, it's going to be millions and millions of dollars. But the actual franchise fee itself is really not that much. It's an amount that, that I think at least provides to the franchisor something to show that the business that it is built, the name that it is built, is worth something. And that's the first thing. So it's only $45,000 initial fee. Now there are continuing franchise fees, 5% of gross sales or $2,000 a month or whatever the franchisor has put in there for the term of the franchise agreement. And there are a lot of hidden fees, and I know that we're going to be talking about that probably
Yes.
a little more. There are a lot of hidden fees. And that's why I said when you get an advisor to help you, make sure that that advisor really understands where to look in that franchise disclosure document and what to look for, because these things are not generally blasted out. There are certain provisions of that FDD that must be disclosed, and they are in there. But it helps when you have somebody who knows where to look.
Yeah, sure. They're somewhere in 1,000 pages. You just have to find it. And one of the things, when I used to buy and sell companies, I remember that our guiding principle was you never get into a deal unless you know how you're going to get out of it. So I presume that is very true for franchises. So what exit strategy should I be thinking about from day one? How easy or how difficult is it going to be to sell my franchise if I decide I want out of this thing?
That's great point, Robin. Franchising is like marriage. Easy to get into, hell to leave. There are all kinds of problems in trying to leave a franchise relationship. There are post-term restrictive covenants. So this business that you've learned about over the last several years, you're not going to be able to just start up your own business with a different name and do the exact same thing you were doing. There's going to be a post-term covenant not to compete. There are confidentiality agreements. So the secrets that you learn as a franchisee cannot be translated to your own business for a certain period of time in a certain location. And those confidentiality agreements, unlike restrictive covenants, don't have necessarily a geographic or time limit to them. The third type of problem with trying to get out of a franchise agreement is that the franchisor actually has a right of approval if you want to sell your business. The franchisor can say, no, you can't sell this business to this person because they also operate a competing business. Or they might say, this person is going to be paying you so much money that they're not going to have the money to properly follow the franchise system. So that's a problem. The franchisor is going to want releases in advance, saying, release us from anything that we may have done wrong, even if you don't know about it now. And there are, of course, ancillary agreements. Your lease, if you have a premise lease, or software licenses and things like that, that have to be terminated Leaving the
Yeah.
franchise
Oh,
agreement's one thing, but you have other parties that are
all
part of
those
the
costs.
business, and they can all be a problem. So leaving a franchise is not easy. I want to just point out one more thing that people sometimes forget. The franchise business is a license business. You are purchasing the license, the ability to use the name and the system for a limited period of time at a limited place. And once that franchise agreement ends, you don't have the right to the McDonald's name, or the Chevy dealers, the name Chevrolet or anything else. You're just using that name. You don't have it. So when you sell, don't think that, oh, I've got a McDonald's, I'm going to be able to sell for more, because the fact of the matter is that's not your name to sell.
Right. Wow, these are all really good points, and also interesting, and different, because, like, to me, in my world, a restrictive covenant to be enforceable has to be time limited.
Yes.
Yeah, like for the sale of a business, it can be maybe 5 years, but you cannot have it indefinitely time limited, and you cannot sign a release of claims if there is, you haven't even gotten into a deal yet. I mean, what would you be waiving? Anything that occurred up until the date you signed an agreement. So, when I look at this, I think, boy, you really need a lawyer to help you with this stuff. And I know my brother-in-law bought a franchise some years ago. He hired a lawyer, and the lawyer advised him, hey, considering all the fees, you're basically just buying yourself a job. You're not going to get rich off of this thing. And my brother-in-law bought it anyway. And of course, the lawyer was exactly right. There were so many layers of costs and payments, and you had to buy all your supplies from the company, which was way more expensive than anything. So there were just so many rules about what he could and couldn't do. So you had mentioned the hidden costs. Can you be more specific? Or are there anything you'd like to draw us, like some examples of these things, and where
Sure.
would I find them, and if I'm doing due diligence?
Of course. You're absolutely right. First, a lot of people do use franchising, or had used franchising, to buy themselves jobs. Back during the 2008, 2010 era, there were so many problems when you had unemployment that was rampant, when you had all sorts of problems, when you had a lot of people who were losing jobs. A lot of people went into franchising because they were indeed buying themselves jobs, and hopefully learning a business and growing at the same time. But the fact is, there are so many of these hidden fees. For example, let me just list a few. I think you'll get the idea. There are software licenses with annual renewal fees. There are management fees, phone center fees. If your franchisor uses a phone system, so that when somebody calls in and says, they might be calling in from California, but the call center is in Atlanta, and then the caller is then sent off to New Hampshire or someone like that, who's the franchisee out there. The franchisor often has call center fees for participating in that referral system. There are mandatory refreshing fees. For example, if you have a 15-year franchise agreement to run a McDonald's, you have to, every 5 years, refurbish, repaint.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Those are the kinds of hidden fees that you don't see all the time, and that you have to go ahead and review that agreement and make sure that you know what you're facing, because refreshing something. Imagine what it's like. What if you have to use a new software system? What if your company merges? What happens when a Cotman transmission merges with an Amco transmission, and now everything becomes Amco, and you have all this new signage, and you have new color schemes and new trade things and everything else. All of these things can create a tremendous amount of money Their advertising review fees and
Oh, yeah.
supplier
Yeah.
fees. What if you decide listen, I can buy I can buy straws at a terrifically low price. Why can't I use the straws that I want to use instead of the straws that McDonald's wants me to use?
Right.
Um, well, tell you what, McDonald's says you can do that, but we have to test the straws first because we want you to make sure that you have quality straws from a quality place. And we're going to have you send to us all the information about this straw company, and we will review it and we'll let you know in a couple of months. Oh, and by
Ah,
the way, there's a review fee of, $2,000 for every
oh
time
my
that
God.
we do something like that. So you have all of these. You have training fees. What if you have to train a new manager of your company? What if you have to train more people than what you normally have to do because someone got sick or someone left? Are there additional training fees? Is there employer training? There's attendance at the annual franchise meeting of that franchisor. There are a lot of additional fees that
Oh,
people forget about. They just don't know. And some of the fees, even when they're listed, are simply not serious. For example, if you go to a lot of franchisors, they'll list the legal fees for getting started as $1,000 or $1,500. Well, that's the cost of maybe forming your, limited liability company or your corporation.
yes.
Um, that has nothing to do with the review of the documents and all of the other fees that come along with getting yourself set up in an entirely new business.
These questions are great. I was going to ask you, give me some sample questions to ask a franchisee or a franchisor, but you've already anticipated that. So that was very, very helpful. Thank you. So, and there's a lot of do's and don't rules, I guess, that can have a big impact. Are there any other rules that you want to point out here? Because these are so helpful, what you've said already.
Yes, and it gives me a chance also, Robin, to make sure that our listeners understand something. I happen to be a fan of franchising. I
Yeah.
think it has a tremendous value. And let me start with that and then work my way to the answer to your question. If you're driving with your kids down I-95 and you have to pull off and you want to get a burger for your kids because they're hungry, you have a choice when you get off I-95. You can go to Joe's Burgers or you can go to McDonald's or another fast food chain. The best part about franchising is that you don't know. Joe's Burgers might be the best darn burgers in the world, but you don't know.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
always know what you're getting
Yeah.
when you go to a McDonald's, when you go to a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Dunkin' or any of these places. You know what you're getting. That's what those golden arches or, whatever the logo is, that's what it stands for. And
Yeah.
protecting that name is very, very, very important. If one franchisee screws up,
Yeah.
every franchised unit in the country
Yeah.
could get
They feel
hurt
the
as a
pain.
result.
Thank you.
And so the franchisors do have to set very strong rules. And you have to, as a franchisee, understand that you must pay attention to those rules. You can't go out on your own and just decide that you want to do things a different way, or you want to do this, or you want to do that. No, it doesn't work that way. These
Yeah.
people rely on the fact that every one of the franchisees is relying on every other franchisee to not screw up.
Right. That consistent quality control, right?
Absolutely.
And
The
one
training
thing,
is everything.
yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
No,
when you're talking about this, I also think one of the things franchisees need to look for very carefully is territory protection,
yes.
because I would want to know, they are not going to put another McDonald's one block down the road from me. Is that something you can negotiate for?
Negotiating, maybe. The newer the franchise system, the better chance you have of negotiating anything in the franchise agreement. Remember that one of the things you have to do as a franchisor is to not discriminate between franchisees. You must treat your similarly situated franchisees the same. You can't give one a special deal without letting the whole world know in your FDD that, you're willing to negotiate. And no franchisor in its right mind wants to let everybody know that they can negotiate. But a newer franchisor, in order to get new people in and to expand a little more quickly, will sometimes cut a deal. And a good franchise attorney, one who has both sides and understands the necessity of a franchisor to do things a certain way and to maintain its uniformity, will know where there's room for some pushback here. But yes, and territory protection is another one of those things that is unfortunately, I don't know the word. I guess illusory would probably be better.
Illusory. That's not a word anybody wants to hear. We only have a couple minutes left. So I wanted to ask you, because you've mediated disputes between franchisors and franchisees, what is the most common or a couple of the most common matters that typically come up here? If you could just do it in a minute or less here.
In most cases where I've seen issues, the issue comes down to the fundamentals of what the franchisor needs to do and what the franchisee was expecting. A franchisor is sitting there saying, you're paying me a certain amount of upfront fees and a certain amount of continuing revenue and contributing to advertising and this and that and all these other charges. And so franchisors are saying, you've got to follow the system. You have to think that this is not just about you, franchisee. We have an entire system here, and we are not allowed to make changes to our franchise agreement unless we are willing then to change our entire FDD for the entire rest of the system. We have to sit here and remember, we're giving this big document to you telling you this is what's in your franchise agreement. These are the things that are necessary. If you're willing to negotiate these things, you have to then change your FDD to say, oh, we've negotiated it here or there. So the franchisee comes in with certain expectations. And
okay, so in other words, I hate to cut you off, but we're out of time. So the idea basically that you're saying is know what you're signing, because they're going to hold you to the contract. And if you don't like it, you need to know that before you get into it.
Franchisors, if you're going to be paid, make it worthwhile. And franchisees, please understand that this is not just about you.
Thank you very much, Ken. We really appreciate that. Those were some really great topics. I had many more questions, but we just can't get to them because unfortunately we're out of time. But thank you for joining us. And next week's Money Matter guest will be Eric Swenson, President of Retirement Plan Solutions. And my next guest on Legal Talk will be David Lever of Lever and Eckler about his work with accident victims. So thank you again for joining us. Have a great time until we see you again here on Legal Talk. Thank you.